The rain hammered the windshield like 1,000 accusations, blurring the world into a grey smear as the family sedan cut through the midnight highway. Inside, 12-year-old Hannah clutched her stuffed bear, its fur matted from her small, sweaty palms. Her father, Jack, gripped the wheel with white-knuckled resolve, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror where his wife, Sarah, hummed a soft lullaby to ease their daughter's nerves. They were heading home from a late dinner with old friends, the kind of night that promised normalcy after months of Jack's grueling shifts at the mill. But the road twisted like a serpent, and in the distance headlights pierced the storm, too fast, too erratic. The collision was a thunderclap of twisted metal and shattering glass. The other vehicle, a runaway truck skidding on the slick asphalt, ploughed into them without mercy. Jack's last thought was of the promise he'd made years ago, whispered in a smoke-filled garage to his brothers-in-arms, "If anything happens to me, you watch over her." Sarah's hand reached for Hannah in the chaos, but the world inverted, spinning into darkness. When the first responders arrived, the scene was a wreckage of silence. 2 lives ended abruptly, their bodies still and broken amid the debris. Hannah, thrown clear but battered, lay unconscious, her bear lost in the mud. Hours later, under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights in Mercy General Hospital, Hannah stirred. The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers, the beeps of monitors a relentless underscore to her confusion. Nurses hovered like shadows, their voices gentle but distant. "Hannah? Can you hear me, sweetie?" A doctor shone a light into her eyes, but she blinked blankly, her gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. No recognition flickered there, not for the woman claiming to be her aunt, not for the faded photos of smiling faces pressed into her hands. The accident had stolen more than her parents. It had erased the map of her life, leaving only fragments, a vague ache in her chest, the phantom scent of leather and engine oil. Days blurred into a haze of tests and therapies. Psychologists sat by her bedside, their clipboards filled with questions that yielded nothing. "Do you remember your school, your home, Mummy and Daddy?" Hannah shook her head, her dark curls falling like a curtain over eyes that seemed to stare through walls. The aunt, Elena, paced the corridors, her face etched with grief and frustration. "She's gone, Doc, like she never knew us." Whispers spread among the staff, a tragedy compounded by amnesia so profound it bordered on the cruel. Hannah withdrew into herself, picking at the hospital blanket, her small frame swallowed by the oversized gown. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent to the girl adrift in her own forgotten story. It was late afternoon on the 4th day when the air shifted. The hospital's quiet routine shattered under the low growl of engines, building like distant thunder rolling in from the horizon. At first, the nurses glanced up from their stations, mistaking it for a passing storm. But the rumble grew, multiplying into a symphony of raw power. 50 motorcycles, their exhausts coughing plumes of smoke that mingled with the fading rain. The convoy rolled into the parking lot like a mechanical herd, leather-clad riders dismounting with synchronized precision. They were the Iron Vows, a brotherhood forged in the fires of old wars and unbreakable oaths, their vests patched with symbols of loyalty, crossed wrenches over a shield, the words "Promise Kept" embroidered in faded thread. Leading them was Marcus Bear Harlan, a towering figure with a salt-and-pepper beard and scars that mapped battles long buried. He'd ridden through the night after Elena's frantic call, the news hitting him like a gut punch. Jack had been one of them, more than a friend, a brother who'd pulled Bear from the brink during their service days. And Sarah, she'd been the heart of their gatherings, the one who baked pies for rides and laughed at their rough jokes. They'd promised Jack over beers in the clubhouse to always have his family's back. Now, that vow called them here. Engines idling like a vow renewed. Inside Hannah's room, the sound pierced the veil. Her head snapped up, eyes widening as the vibration rattled the window pane. For the first time since waking, color flushed her cheeks. She slid from the bed, bare feet padding across the cold tile, ignoring the nurse's startled call. Pressing her palms to the glass, she watched the sea of helmets and handlebars below, the bikers forming a protective semicircle around the hospital entrance. Tears welled unbidden, tracing hot paths down her face. The roar wasn't just noise. It was a memory unearthed from the depths, a sensation of safety wrapped in thunder. "The brothers," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the storm of sound. "The brothers are here." Elena burst into the room, phone in hand, her eyes mirroring Hannah's awe. "You remember them?" But Hannah didn't turn, transfixed by the sight. Bear looked up as if sensing her gaze, removing his helmet to reveal eyes heavy with unspoken sorrow. He nodded once, a silent affirmation that cut through the miles and years. The girl who remembered nothing felt it then. A pull deeper than words, a loyalty that defied the void in her mind. These weren't strangers, they were the echo of protection, the rumble that had once meant homecomings from school in a whirlwind of chrome and cheers. As the engines quieted to a respectful purr, the brotherhood waited, their presence a shield against the unraveling world. Hannah's whisper hung in the air, a spark igniting something lost. In that moment, the promise Jack had clung to in his final seconds began to weave its redemption, not through vengeance or spectacle, but through the quiet honor of showing up. The girl at the window, tears drying on her skin, stepped back, a faint smile breaking through. For the first time, the emptiness inside her stirred with possibility. The brothers had come, and with them, the first thread of a life reclaimed. Down in the lot, Bear slung his helmet over the handlebars, his calloused hands flexing as he addressed the crew. "We ride for Jack and Sarah, for her." Nods rippled through the ranks, faces hardened by sun and road but softened by purpose. They weren't here to storm the gates, they were here to stand vigil, to remind the world and the girl above that some bonds outlast the storms that try to break them. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the bikes, their metallic gleam a promise etched in steel. Hannah watched until the last rider settled, her heart sinking to the fading hum. Whatever came next, she wasn't alone. The brothers were here, and that truth, buried deep, had found its way back. The sun hung low over Mercy General, painting the parking lot in hues of amber and shadow, as if the sky itself mourned the day's unraveling. Bear Harlan stood at the forefront of the iron vows, his broad shoulders casting a long silhouette across the asphalt. The engines had fallen silent now, but the air thrummed with their residual power, the scent of hot metal and rain-soaked leather clinging like a vow unspoken. He scanned the hospital facade, his gaze locking on the third-floor window where a small figure lingered, pale face pressed to the glass. Hannah. The name alone stirred the embers of old loyalties, pulling at the thread of a promise made in the dim glow of a desert outpost years ago. Jack's voice gravelly over shared cigarettes. "If the world turns on my girl, you bring the thunder." Elena emerged from the sliding doors, her steps hurried, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. She'd been the bridge, the one who dialed Bear's number in the dead of night, her voice cracking through the static. "They're here," she said, breathless, glancing back at the convoy. 50 riders, a wall of denim and determination, their bikes lined up like sentinels. Some leaned against their machines, arms crossed, others murmured low, sharing nods that spoke of battles won and lost. Elena's hand trembled as she reached for Bear's arm. She said something about brothers. "Doc says it's a miracle, but it's more than that. It's them." Bear's jaw tightened, the salt in his beard catching the fading light. He'd seen miracles before, men pulling through sandstorms with nothing but grit and a brother's hand. But this, a girl pieced back together by the roar of Harleys? He removed his shades, revealing eyes weathered by too many sunrises on empty roads. "Lead the way," he rumbled, his voice like gravel under tires. The crew stirred behind him, a select few, veterans with stories etched in ink and scars, falling in step. No fanfare, no demands, just the quiet resolve of men who'd learned that true strength lay in showing up when the world forgot. Inside, the hospital corridors echoed with the soft squeak of polished floors and the distant ping of elevators. Nurses paused in their rounds, casting wary glances at the procession, Bear's massive frame leading, followed by 5 riders whose presence seemed to shrink the sterile space. Whispers rippled. "Who are they?" "Family." But Elena waved them off, her aunt's authority cutting through the uncertainty. They reached Hannah's room, the door ajar, revealing the girl seated on the bed's edge, her hospital gown rumpled, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. The psychologist, Dr. Reyes, stood nearby, clipboard in hand, his expression a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Hannah looked up as Bear entered, her eyes, wide and searching, meeting his without flinching. For a beat the room held its breath, the only sound the faint drip of an IV line. Then something shifted in her posture, a subtle lean forward, as if an invisible cord tugged at her core. Bear knelt slowly, bringing himself to her level, his knees protesting the years. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly, the words carrying the weight of forgotten rides and backyard barbecues. "Name's Bear, your folks. They were family to us, still are, in a way." She tilted her head, dark curls framing a face still bruised from the crash. No words came at first, just a flicker in her gaze, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The scent of leather from his vest wafted toward her, mingling with the faint tang of motor oil that seemed to seep from his pores. It stirred something primal, a warmth uncoiling in her chest, not a memory exactly, but a feeling. Safety. The kind that came with the whoop of engines circling the school lot on Fridays, her parents laughing as she climbed onto the back of Jack's bike for a spin. "Brothers," she murmured again, the word tasting like ash and honey on her tongue. "You protect." Dr. Reyes cleared his throat, stepping forward. "This is remarkable, but we must be cautious. Amnesia like hers, it's selective, tied to trauma. Pushing could set her back." His tone held the clipped efficiency of protocols, but Bear's eyes narrowed, reading the undercurrent of dismissal. Institutions like this saw threats in the unconventional, families measured by bloodlines on charts. Elena interjected, her voice steady. "They're not pushing, they're here. That's what she needs." Bear ignored the doctor, focusing on Hannah. He pulled a small patch from his vest pocket, faded denim with the Iron Vows emblem, crossed wrenches over a heart. "Your dad wore one like this," he said, placing it in her palm. Her fingers closed around it instinctively, the rough texture grounding her. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. Instead, she traced the stitches with her thumb, the motion unlocking a cascade, flashes of chrome gleaming under streetlights, the rumble vibrating through her small frame as the convoy escorted her home from a birthday party. No faces, no names, just the unyielding certainty that these men had been her shield. Outside, the rest of the crew held their ground, a living barrier against the encroaching dusk. One rider, a wiry veteran named Jax with tattoos snaking up his arms, lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke that curled like a question. "Think she'll remember the promise?" he asked the group, voice low. They'd all heard Jack's words that night in the garage, seals on a bond forged in foxholes and forgotten wars. "Doesn't matter," another replied, a woman named Riley, her hair cropped short under her helmet. "We remember for her." Their loyalty wasn't born of obligation, but of the quiet code that some debts transcended time, promises kept not for glory, but for the honor of the fallen. Back in the room, Hannah's grip tightened on the patch. "Stay." It was a plea wrapped in fragility, her voice barely above the hum of the vents. Bear nodded, settling into a chair that creaked under his weight. "Long as you need, kid. We're not going anywhere." The doctor hovered, muttering about visiting hours, but Eleanor's glare silenced him. For the first time, the monitor's beep seemed less intrusive, the room warmer, as if the Brotherhood's presence wove a new layer of protection around the girl. As evening deepened, shadows lengthening across the bed, Hannah leaned back against the pillows, the patch clutched to her chest. The void in her mind felt less vast now, pierced by the echo of engines and the solid truth of chosen kin. Bear watched her drift towards sleep, his own memories surfacing, Jack's laugh echoing over a campfire, Sarah's hand on his shoulder after a rough ride. The accident had taken much, but not this, the redemption in fulfilling a vow, one quiet vigil at a time. Outside, the bikes stood ready, their silent vigil a testament that some families roared louder in absence than in presence. The girl slept, and in her dreams the thunder returned, not as fear, but as home. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first rays of dawn crept through the hospital blinds like hesitant fingers, casting striped patterns across Hannah's sleeping form. She stirred under the thin blanket, the iron vows patch still clutched in her fist, its edges softened by the night's grip. The room felt different now, less like a cage of white walls and more like a temporary outpost, guarded by the low murmur of voices filtering from the hallway. Bear Harlan hadn't moved from his chair. His massive frame slumped in uneasy repose, one boot propped against the bed frame. Sleep had evaded him, chased away by the weight of old oaths and the girl's fragile breaths sinking with his own. Elena slipped back into the room, carrying 2 styrofoam cups steaming with bitter coffee, her eyes shadowed but resolute. She'd spent the night coordinating with the crew outside, turning the parking lot into an impromptu camp. Coolers of sandwiches passed hand to hand, flashlights cutting through the dark as stories of Jack and Sarah wove through the air like smoke from a dying fire. "They're holding steady," she whispered, handing Bear a cup. "Jack's rigged a perimeter with the bikes. Nothing gets in without us knowing." Her voice carried the edge of someone who'd learned to trust steel over sympathy, especially after the accident's investigators had shown up yesterday, their questions probing like scalpels. Why the truck? Who was driving? Loose ends that smelled of negligence. If not worse. Bear took a sip, the heat grounding him as he watched Hannah's eyelids flutter. The girl woke slowly, her gaze finding him first, a spark of recognition, no familiarity, lighting her features. No flood of memories, just that quiet pull, like the hum of an idling engine settling into her bones. "Morning," he rumbled, his voice rough from disuse. She sat up, the patch tumbling into her lap, and traced its emblem again, the crossed wrenches evoking a distant echo, hands steadying her on a bike seat, laughter rumbling over the wind as the convoy blurred the world into streaks of color. "Hungry?" he asked, pulling a wrapped sandwich from his vest pocket, peanut butter and jelly, simple as the rides they'd shared. She nodded, small bites revealing a tentative smile, the first real one since the crash. Dr. Reyes entered then, his white coat crisp against the dawn's pallor, clipboard at the ready. "Visiting hours start soon," he said, eyes flicking to Bear with thinly veiled disapproval. "And while I appreciate the support, we need to discuss discharge protocols. Her amnesia requires structured therapy, not—" He paused, gesturing vaguely at the leather-clad giant. "Unconventional interventions." The words hung, laced with the hospital's unspoken hierarchy. Protocols over promises, charts over chosen kin. Elena's chin lifted. She's responding to them, to him. That's more than your tests have done. The doctor sighed, flipping a page. Emotional anchors can help, but legally, with no blood relation. His implication was clear. The Brotherhood's vigil, while touching, skirted the edges of authority. Bear leaned forward, his presence filling the space like a gathering storm. Jack made us swear to her. That's blood enough. No threat in his tone, just the unyielding truth of a vow etched deeper than ink. Reyes hesitated, then nodded curtly. We'll revisit this later. For now, a family session might aid progress. As the doctor left, Hannah's fingers tightened on the patch. Papa swore. Her voice was a whisper, piecing fragments from the void. Bear met her eyes, choosing words like he would a careful turn on black ice. Yeah, kid, in a garage lit by one bulb after a long ride, your folks and us, we were tight. Fought side by side, back when the world was sand and shadows. He said if trouble came, we'd roll up like thunder, keep you safe. The memory surfaced for him then. Jack's grip firm on his shoulder, Sarah's knowing smile across the table, the clink of bottles sealing the pact. Not just words, but a lifeline tossed across years. Outside, the crew stirred as the sun climbed, engines coughing to life in a staggered chorus. Jax wiped dew from his handlebars, his wiry frame taut with vigilance. Word had trickled in overnight, rumors from Elena's contacts at the mill. The truck driver? A shadow figure tied to shady halls, the kind that skirted regulations for quick cash. No charges yet, just investigation pending, but the Brotherhood smelled rot. A system that buried truths under paperwork, leaving families like Hannah's adrift. Riley, ever the sharp-eyed scout, scanned her phone. Cops are coming back today. Want statements. Jax spat to the side. Let 'em. We ride straight. Nothing to hide but our loyalty. Hannah slid from the bed, padding to the window where the convoy reassembled below, and bikes gleaming like polished armor under the rising light. The sight stirred more, the feel of wind whipping her hair during escort rides, the protective circle of riders around her school bus after a playground scuffle. No faces yet, but the essence, the unshakable shield of brothers who drop everything for one of their own. They... for me? She asked, turning to Bear. He stood, towering yet gentle, and placed a hand on her shoulder, the warmth seeping through the gown. For you. For the promise. Your heart knows it, even if the rest is fuzzy. Elena watched, her own grief softening at the edges. This was redemption unfolding. Not in grand gestures, but in the quiet rebuilding of what the crash had shattered. Yet tension coiled beneath. The doctor's warnings echoed institutional walls closing in, and outside, the investigator's arrival loomed like a checkpoint on a hostile road. Bear sensed it, his free hand flexing as if gripping invisible throttle. We stick close, he told Hannah. No one's taking you from this. She nodded, a flicker of steel in her eyes mirroring his own. By mid-morning, the session began in a sunlit lounge. The group huddled around a scarred table, Hannah, Elena, Bear, and a reluctant Dr. Reyes. Photos were spread out, faded snapshots of family barbecues, Hannah tiny on Jack's knee amid a sea of vests. She touched one, the image blurring through unshed tears, engines lined up like faithful hounds, her parents' arms around her. Home, she breathed, the word unlocking a warmth that chased the chill of amnesia. Reyes noted it furiously, but Bear saw deeper, the moral compass realigning, justice not in courts, but in the honor of presence. As the session wrapped, a knock echoed. 2 detectives in rumpled suits, badges glinting. Miss Ramirez, about the accident. Elena rose, but Bear stepped forward, his shadow engulfing them. We're family. Ask away. The lead detective eyed the patch on Hannah's shirt, now pinned proudly. This complicates things. Witnesses say the truck veered, possible foul play. Whispers of corruption surfaced, bribes at the mill, routes ignored for profit. The Brotherhood's ears perked. This wasn't just loss, but a wrong-begging poetic reckoning. Hannah clutched Bear's hand, her small fingers steady. The void receded further, filled by the rumble of loyalty, the scent of resolve. Outside, the engines revved once, a signal rippling through the crew. Stand ready. The promise pulsed alive, weaving redemption from threads of thunder and truth. In that lounge, amid questions and shadows, the girl found her anchor, not in memory's return, but in the unbreakable circle closing around her. The brothers weren't just here. They were the force that would unearth the hidden injustices, one honorable mile at a time. The detectives' badges caught the lounge's fluorescent glare like cold stars, their suits creased from hours, chasing leads that led nowhere. The lead one, Harlan, coincidentally sharing Bear's last name, though no relation, cleared his throat, pulling a notebook from his pocket. "Ms. Ramirez, we're following up on the highway incident. The truck driver claims mechanical failure, but forensics suggest otherwise. Brake lines tampered, perhaps." His partner, a younger woman with sharp eyes named Torres, nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. Elena's defiant stance, Bear's unyielding bulk, Hannah's small hand still in the biker's calloused palm, and Dr. Reyes hovering like a referee, unsure of the rules. Elena leaned against the table, arms crossed, the weight of sleepless nights etching lines deeper into her face. "Tampered? You mean someone cut those lines on purpose?" Her voice cracked the air, sharp as shattering glass. The accident replayed in her mind, not the crash itself, but the aftermath, twisted wreckage under tarps, the mill's whispers about cut corners and shadowed deals. Jack had complained about unsafe hauls, routes pushed too hard for deadlines that benefited the bosses alone. Now, this, a thread of foul play pulling at the edges of tragedy. Bear's grip on Hannah tightened fractionally, protective, as if shielding her from the storm brewing in words alone. He'd seen corruption before, back in uniform, supply chains rotten from the top, brothers lost to accidents that smelled of greed. The iron vows had ridden against such shadows then, not with guns but with unblinking witness, forcing truths into the light. "Who owns that truck?" he asked, his rumble low, eyes locked on Harlan like a headlight-piercing fog. The detective shifted, uncomfortable under the scrutiny. "Registered to Northridge Freight, small outfit, but tied to the mill's contracts. Driver's in custody, but he's clamming up, says he heard voices, threats." Hannah's breath hitched, her free hand clutching the patch pinned to her gown. The lounge's air grew thick, laced with the faint coffee bitterness from earlier and the underlying tang of tension. Like oil on water, flashes teased her mind's edges, not the crash, but before. Her father's furrowed brow over dinner, mentioning bad runs that kept him late, her mother's quiet worry as she tucked Hannah in. The engines outside hummed faintly through the walls, a distant reassurance sinking with her pulse. "Papa." "Worried," she murmured, the words slipping out unbidden, drawing all eyes. "Doctor," Reyes scribbled furiously, but Elena knelt beside her, voice soft. "What do you mean, sweetie?" The girl frowned, piecing shadows. "Lights. Big truck." He said, "Watch the road, brothers." But no faces. It wasn't memory, not fully, just echoes, stirred by the detective's probe and the solid anchor of Bear's presence. Torres leaned in, gentle but probing. "Your dad ever mentioned trouble at work? Arguments?" Hannah shook her head, but the question unlocked more. The rumble of bikes pulling up to their house after one such night, Jack clapping Bear on the back, the crew's low voices promising to sort it. Loyalty woven into the fabric of her lost world. Harlan closed his notebook, exhaling. "Look, this could be negligence, or worse. Corporate cover-up. We've got warrants out for records, but Northridge is lawyered up tight, if you know anything." His eyes lingered on the biker's emblems, sensing the undercurrent of a network that bypassed red tape. Bear met his gaze steadily. "We know promises. Jack rode with us, clean, honorable. If someone's twisting the wheel to bury this, we'll ride it out. No bravado, just the quiet thunder of intent, the kind that moved mountains of silence." As the detectives departed, promising updates that felt as hollow as echoing corridors, the lounge emptied, leaving the group in a pocket of strained quiet. Dr. Reyes excused himself, muttering about consultations, but his steps hurried, as if the biker's influence unsettled the hospital's sterile order. Elena paced, phone buzzing with texts from mill workers, rumors of falsified logs, a foreman with sticky fingers. "This isn't random," she said, voice fierce. "Jack was pushing back. He told me weeks ago, routes overloaded, trucks pushed past safe limits. For what? Profits?" Bear nodded, guiding Hannah back toward her room, the girl's steps lighter despite the shadows. Outside, the convoy had shifted, bikes forming a tighter phalanx, riders exchanging nods as Jax relayed the detective's visit via walkie-talkies crackling like distant lightning. Riley revved her engine once, a punctuation of resolve, the exhaust's sharp scent wafting through an open window. "We dig deeper," Bear told Elena over his shoulder. "Call in favors, old contacts from the service days. No stone unturned. No promise broken." In the room, Hannah climbed onto the bed, the patch now tucked under her pillow like a talisman. The morning session had cracked the amnesia wider, fragments surfacing like debris after a flood. The feel of leather seats warmed by sun, the chorus of engines heralding safe returns. Bear settled into his chair, the wood groaning, while Elena drew the blinds against the midday glare. "She's opening up," Elena said, a spark of hope cutting her exhaustion. "Because of you all. That's the family she needs now." Hannah looked up, eyes clearer, the void receding like mist under rising sun. "Ride with me?" It was a question laced with longing, the instinct for protection blooming into trust. Bear's smile cracked his weathered face, faint but genuine. "When you're ready, kid, we'll lead the way." The words sealed it, a new vow layered over the old, redemption threading through loss. But outside, the mill's shadow loomed larger, corruption's tendrils reaching for cover, investigators circling like wary crows. The Brotherhood would counter, not with fury, but with the relentless honor of truth-seekers on the road. By afternoon, the crew mobilized subtly, Jax slipping out to tail a Northridge van, Riley cross-referencing routes on a battered laptop in the lot. Whispers of bribes surfaced. A supervisor paid to ignore inspections, the truck's maintenance logs doctored. Elena shared it all in hushed tones, the room a command post amid beeping monitors. Hannah listened, her small frame tense, the accident's ghost stirring not fear but a quiet fire. The patch warmed under her touch, symbol of bonds that outlasted crashes and cover-ups. As shadows lengthened, Bear stepped to the window, watching the sun dip behind the hospital's silhouette. The engines idled low, a heartbeat for the girl inside. Justice wasn't a verdict. It was this, chosen kin unraveling lies, one honorable turn at a time. Hannah slept fitfully, dreams laced with thunder, while the promise pulsed onward, toward reckoning and the reclamation of a life stolen too soon. If this chapter moved you, please hit that like button. It helps spread these stories of loyalty and redemption to more hearts out there. The afternoon sun slanted through the hospital blinds like bars of molten gold, turning the room into a patchwork of light and shadow. Hannah sat cross-legged on the bed, the Iron Vows patch now sewn hastily onto the sleeve of a fresh T-shirt Eleanor had brought from home. Simple cotton, but it carried the weight of armor. Her fingers traced the emblem absent-mindedly, the crossed wrenches evoking a rhythm in her chest, like the steady thump of pistons firing in unison. Outside, The parking lot hummed with subdued activity. Jax returning from his tail on the Northridge van, his bike kicking up faint gravel dust as he parked. The air carried the sharp bite of exhaust, mixed with the earthy scent of cooling asphalt. A reminder that the Brotherhood's vigil was far from passive. Bear paced the narrow space between the bed and window, his boots scuffing softly against the linoleum, each step a measured beat in the gathering storm. Eleanor sat nearby, scrolling through messages on her phone, her face a map of furrowed resolve. Jack's got eyes on the foreman, Rourke. He's the one signing off on those routes. Mill workers say he's been skimming maintenance budgets, pocketing the difference. The truck, it was due for brakes months ago, but logs show it passed under his watch. Her words hung heavy, laced with the bitterness of betrayal. Jack had trusted men like Rourke, shared shifts and stories, only for greed to twist the wheel that ended his life. Hannah's head lifted, her eyes, still shadowed by the accident's bruises, flickering with a spark of clarity. The fragments were coming faster now, not as full pictures but as sensations. The acrid smell of overheated engines during a family ride, her father's voice cutting through the wind, warning about corners cut for coin. She pressed a hand to her temple, wincing as the ache bloomed. Papa said no to the shortcuts. The room stilled, Eleanor's phone forgotten in her lap. Bear stopped pacing, kneeling beside the bed, his presence a solid anchor amid the swirl. What else, kid? Let it come. She closed her eyes, the low murmur of idling bikes outside, sinking with her breath, pulling threads from the void. Big meeting, at the mill, shouts. He came home late, vest torn. You fixed it. The image sharpened. Bear's garage, tools clinking under a bare bulb, Jack's laugh rumbling as stitches were sewn into leather, the crew gathered like guardians. It wasn't just repair, it was reaffirmation, a promise mended after Rourke's pressure to overlook hazards. Hannah's voice trembled but held firm. He wouldn't bend for us. Tears welled, not from sorrow alone, but from the emerging truth that her father's honor had been the target, his refusal a spark that ignited the crash. Elena rose, crossing to the window, where Riley leaned against her bike below, walkie-talkie crackling with updates. "We need proof," Elena said, voice edged with steel. "The detectives are dragging their feet. Northridge's lawyers are flooding them with denials." Bear stood, his shadow stretching across the bed like a protective wing. He'd called in markers that morning, old service buddies now in logistics, voices from the shadows confirming the rot, bribes funneled through shell accounts, Rourke the linchpin, ensuring trucks rolled unsafe to meet quotas. "We go to the source," Bear rumbled, "not with fists, but facts. Ride to the mill at dusk. Show Rourke we see him." The plan unfolded in hushed tones, the room transforming into a war council of quiet intent. Hannah listened, her small frame straightening, the patch a badge of inclusion. For the first time, the hospital felt like a waypoint, not a prison, the beeps of monitors fading against the pull of purpose. Dr. Reyes knocked then, entering with his usual clipboard armor, but his expression softened at the group's focus. "Progress notes show improvement," he admitted, glancing at Hannah. "The external stimuli seem to be catalyzing recall, but discharge is imminent. Social services will evaluate guardianship." His words carried the chill of bureaucracy, a reminder that chosen family faced scrutiny from suits who measured bonds in legalese. Bear's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "We're ready. She's coming with us, home where the thunder is." Reyes hesitated, then jotted a note. "I'll advocate. This case. It's unconventional, but effective." As he left, the door clicked shut like a seal on their resolve. Elena squeezed Hannah's hand, the aunt's grief yielding to fierce protection. "Your parents built this circle for you. We're just keeping the engines running." Dusk crept in, painting the sky in bruised purples as the convoy assembled. 50 bikes, a rolling testament to loyalty, engines coughing to life in a staggered roar that vibrated through the hospital walls. Hannah stood at the window, heart pounding in time with the symphony below, the scent of revving exhaust seeping through the cracks like an invitation. Bear helped her into a jacket, oversized, borrowed from Riley, its leather warm and reassuring. "Ride easy," he said, lifting her into a wheelchair for the descent, though her eyes burned with the urge to straddle a seat. They wheeled her out into the cooling air, the lot a sea of gleaming chrome under sodium lights. Jax approached, helmet under arm, his wiry frame buzzing with intel. "Rourke's at the mill now, closing up, alone. Got a tip he's burning records." The crew mounted up, vests snapping in the breeze, faces set in lines of unyielding honor. No weapons, just the power of presence and the weight of witnessed truth. Eleanor walked beside the chair, while Bear pushed, his steps syncing with the idling pulse. The ride to the mill was a procession of measured thunder, bikes flanking the hospital van Elena had secured for Hannah's transport. Wind whipped through open windows, carrying the desert-sharp tang of open road and the faint metallic bite of industry ahead. Hannah pressed her face to the glass, fragments cascading, school pickups in a whirlwind of cheers, birthday parades where the brothers formed an honor guard, her parents' pride in the unbreakable chain. The amnesia cracked wider, not shattering but yielding, revealing the core of love that no collision could erase. At the mill's chain-link gates, shadows pooled under floodlights, the hulking silos, silent witnesses to labor's grind. Rourke's office light flickered like a guilty beacon. The convoy halted in a disciplined arc, engines cutting to a respectful growl. Bear dismounted first, striding to the gate with Elena and a handful of riders, Hannah watching from the van's safety, her breath fogging the window. Rourke emerged, face paling at the sight, 50 shadows of retribution, not rage but reckoning. "You knew Jack," Bear said, voice carrying like gravel over steel. "Pushed him on those runs, cut the corners that killed him." Rourke stammered, sweat beading despite the chill, papers clutched in trembling hands. It was business, quotas, nothing personal. But the lie crumbled under their gaze, the Brotherhood's silence more damning than shouts. Jack stepped forward, holding a flash drive, digital trails from hacked logs, favors called in shadows. "This ends. Confess, or we hand it to the badges with our testimony." Rourke's shoulders slumped, the fight draining like oil from a leak. "All right. The bribes, the tampering, to keep the halls moving." Words spilled then, a confession uncoiling in the night air, the moral weight crushing his denials. Hannah, peering from the van, felt the justice settle, not vengeance, but truth unearthed, honoring her father's stand. Tears traced her cheeks, but a smile ghosted her lips, the promise redeemed in whispers and steel. As Rourke was led away by arriving detectives, alerted anonymously, the crew reformed, engines igniting in a chorus of closure. Hannah's van pulled into the line, the girl waving from the window, her heart full with the roar that meant home. The road stretched ahead. Toward Elena's house turned sanctuary, where memories would rebuild brick by thunderous brick, but in the rear view, shadows lingered, Northridge's higher-ups, webs yet untangled. The Brotherhood rode on, loyalty's engine unyielding, carrying the girl toward full reclamation, one honorable mile into the healing dark. The night air clung to the convoy like a shroud as they rolled away from the mill, the engine's growl softening to a steady hum that echoed the quiet triumph settling over the group. Hannah rode in the van's passenger seat now, the oversized jacket zipped tight against the chill, her small hands gripping the door handle as if anchoring herself to the motion. Streetlights blurred into golden streaks, casting fleeting glows on her face, still pale, but etched with a newfound resolve that chased the last shadows of amnesia. The scent of diesel and distant rain filled the cab, mingling with the faint, comforting leather from Bear's borrowed vest draped over her lap. Elena drove, her knuckles white on the wheel, eyes flicking to the mirrors where the Brotherhood flanked them, 50 bikes weaving a protective web through the suburban sprawl. Bear rode point on his weathered Harley, the wind slicing through his beard like an old friend's tease, carrying whispers of closure from the mill. Rourke's confession had cracked the facade. Bribes traced to mid-level suits, logs faked to hide the truck's fatal flaws. But as Jax had relayed over the crackling walkie, the web stretched higher. Northridge's owner, a slick operator named Vance, pulling strings from a downtown high-rise. No direct tie to Jack's death yet, but the pattern screamed cover-up, a moral rot that demanded uprooting. Bear's mind replayed the foreman's slump under floodlights, words tumbling like loose gravel. Vance pushed quotas, said look the other way or walk. Honor, Bear knew, wasn't avenged in one night. It was a road winding and relentless. Back at Elena's modest ranch house on the town's edge, porch light flickering like a beacon, the convoy dispersed into the yard, bikes parking in orderly rows under the stars. The house smelled of fresh paint and simmering stew, Elena's attempt at normalcy amid the storm. Hannah stepped out, legs unsteady but determined, Bear's hand steadying her elbow. The crew gathered loosely. Riley wiping down her handlebars with a rag that smelled of oil and resolve. Jax nursing a thermos of black coffee, his tattoos shifting like maps of old campaigns. They weren't celebrating. The air hummed with the unfinished edge of justice, the promise to Jack demanding full measure. Inside, the living room became a makeshift hearth, lamplight warming the worn couch where Hannah curled up. The patch now, a constant companion pinned to her jacket. Elena ladled stew into bowls, steam rising like morning mist over a desert ride. But appetite was secondary to the unfolding plan. Bear spread a crumpled map on the coffee table. Routes from the mill to Vance's office, marked with Jax's intel, shell companies, payoffs routed through anonymous accounts. Rourke flipped on the small fish, Bear said, his voice a low rumble cutting the quiet. But Vance, he's the headwaters, hides behind lawyers, calls it business ethics. The word twisted on his tongue, bitter as bad fuel. Hannah's spoon paused midway, her eyes distant as another fragment surfaced, her father's silhouette in the garage, tools clinking under the hood of his old truck, muttering about suits who forget the road's price. The image wove with the engine's echo, pulling more from the void, Sarah's hand on Jack's shoulder, urging caution, the brother's nod sealing silent support. He fought them, she said softly, the words gaining strength. For safe rides. For us. The room turned to her, Elena's eyes misting as she set down her bowl. This wasn't just recall. It was redemption blooming, the girl's heart reclaiming what trauma had buried. Riley leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, her cropped hair catching the light. We ride to Vance at first light. Not storming, no drama. Just show up, lay out the facts. Witnesses, logs, Rourke's statement, force his hand. Nods rippled through the group, the women's voices blending with the men's in a chorus of unity. The iron vows weren't vigilantes, they were witnesses, their loyalty a blade honed by years of keeping oaths in foxholes and on forgotten highways. Jax pulled up files on his tablet, screens glowing blue. Digital breadcrumbs leading to Vance's doorstep, favors from service contacts confirming the bribe's flow. As midnight deepened, the house settled into watchful quiet. Hannah drifted to a spare room, the bed creaking under her slight weight, dreams laced with chrome and thunder. Convoy lights piercing night, her parents' laughter sinking with the roar. Bear stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning under his boots, lighting a cigarette whose smoke curled toward the constellations. Elena joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "She's remembering more every hour," she whispered, voice thick with gratitude and ache. "Because of this. Of you." Bear exhaled slowly, the ember flaring like a distant taillight. "Jack's doing. We just rev the engine." Dawn broke with a blush on the horizon, the sky streaking pink as the convoy reformed. Engines coughed awake, a symphony building from murmurs to full-throated power, vibrating through the yard like a heartbeat renewed. Hannah emerged, jacket zipped, the patch gleaming, her steps surer toward the van. Bear knelt once more, eye level. "You with us, kid?" She nodded, a fierce light in her gaze, the same unyielding spark Jack had carried. "For Papa, for truth." The words sealed it, a vow layered over the old, binding chosen family tighter. The ride to Vance's office cut through waking streets, bikes flanking the van in a river of steel and resolve. Wind carried the crisp bite of morning dew and exhaust. Hannah's window cracked to let it in, sinking her pulse to the rhythm. Downtown loomed, glass towers reflecting the sun like judgmental mirrors, but the brotherhood pressed on. Undeterred, they pulled up in formation outside the high-rise, engines idling in a low growl that turned heads, suited pedestrians pausing, security eyeing from the lobby. Vance's office overlooked the city, all polished oak and false smiles. But the door swung open to Bear's knock, the executive's face draining at the sight. Leather vests filling the threshold, Hannah peeking from behind Elena. "What is this?" Vance blustered, tie askew. Bear placed the flash drive on the desk, Jax's compiled evidence beside it. Confessions, falsified records, the human cost in quiet detail. "Jack Ramirez stood against your cuts, paid with his life. We're here to end it." No raised voices, just the weight of truth, the moral gravity pulling Vance down. He crumpled into his chair, sweat beading as the pieces aligned, Rourke's arrest, detectives circling. It was pressure from above, corporate survival. But the excuses faltered under their gaze, the brotherhood's silence, a mirror to his corruption. Hannah stepped forward, voice steady. "Papa kept his word, now you keep yours." The words hung, poetic justice uncoiling. Vance's hand reaching for the phone to call his board, to unravel the lies from the top. As admissions flowed, full disclosure promised, restitution for the Ramirez family. The sun climbed higher, bathing the room in unforgiving light. Outside, engines purred in victory's hush, the convoy a shield that had pierced the shadows. Hannah felt it then, the void filling not with every lost detail, but with the essence. Loyalty's raw, promises eternal. The ride home would carry them lighter, redemption's engine humming toward wholeness, one honorable turn complete. But the road, ever true, whispered of legacies yet to ride. The high-rise office, bathed in midday sun, felt like a glass cage, sunlight fracturing across Vance's desk like shards of exposed conscience. Papers scattered under his trembling hands, contracts, ledgers, the brittle scaffolding of his empire, while the iron vows stood unmoving, a wall of leather and quiet authority filling the doorway. Bear Harlan's shadow loomed longest, his broad frame blocking the escape of light, eyes steady as the horizon after a storm. Hannah peeked from behind Elena's side, her small fingers twisting the hem of her jacket, the patch's emblem pressing into her palm like a talisman of reclaimed truth. The air hummed with the faint vibration of engines idling far below, a distant thunder underscoring the moment's gravity. Vance slumped deeper into his leather chair, the creak echoing like a confession yielding. Sweat traced paths down his temples, mingling with the sterile scent of polished wood and stale coffee from an untouched mug. "You don't understand," he stammered, voice cracking under the weight of their gaze. "The margins, quotas from the board. Rourke was just the middleman. I followed orders." But the words rang hollow, unraveling like frayed ropes in the wind. Jack stepped forward, his wiry build deceptively calm, sliding a printed dossier across the desk. Timestamps of tampered inspections, wire transfers to offshore shadows, Jack's complaints logged and ignored. "Orders that killed a good man," Jack said, tone even as a straight road, and left his girl piecing herself back together. Elena's breath caught, her hand finding Hannah's shoulder, a steady anchor amid the unraveling. The girl felt it then, a surge through her chest, not memory's full flood, but the core essence, her father's unbent spine, the way he'd revved his engine home after mill shifts, vowing over dinner that safety came before profit. Flashes teased the edges, Sarah's gentle scold, the brothers' laughter sealing packs in the garage glow, engines cooling like faithful hounds after a run. "He chose right," Hannah whispered, her voice cutting the tension like a clear bell. Vance's eyes flicked to her, widening at the child's unyielding stare, the moral mirror he couldn't dodge. In that instant, the void in her mind felt bridged, not by every lost detail, but by the honor radiating from the circle around her, chosen kin, thunder incarnate. Bear leaned in, palms flat on the desk, the wood groaning under his weight. The promise was to protect her, to make sure no one like you twists the wheel again. No roar, just the rumble of truth, honed by years of foxholes and forgotten oaths. Vance's fingers hovered over the phone, then gripped it, dialing with a defeated exhale. "I'll call the board, full audit, disclosures, everything. Restitution for the family too. No more shadows." The line connected, his voice shifting to clipped directives, the Empire's facade cracking wide as admissions poured forth. Systemic bribes, pressured overrides, the chain of greed that had veered the truck into fate's path. Outside, the convoy held formation, Riley scanning the lobby from her bike, walkie crackling with updates from scouts circling the block. No threats loomed now. The air cleared like post-rain pavement, exhaust fading into the urban hum. Detectives would follow, the badges, Harlan and Torres, tipped anonymously with Jax's drive, turning whispers into warrants, justice poetic in its unraveling. The Brotherhood hadn't stormed, they'd arrived, witnessed, and extracted honors due, their loyalty a force quieter than violence, but unbreakably true. As Vance hung up, the room exhaled, sunlight shifting to warm the space like dawn after vigil. Elena guided Hannah toward the door, the girl's steps light, the jacket's leather whispering against her arms. "It's over?" Hannah asked, looking up at Bear, her eyes, once adrift, now anchored in certainty. He nodded, a rare softness cracking his weathered features. "For now, the road's long, but we've got your back." The words layered over Jack's old vow, redemption weaving through loss like chrome threading dusk. The descent in the elevator hummed with subdued relief, mirrors reflecting their faces. Elena's grief softened to resolve, Jax's tattoos a map of battles won, Hannah's faint smile blooming like wildflowers after fire. They emerged into the lobby, the glass doors parting to the waiting roar, engines revving in salute, a chorus that vibrated through Hannah's bones, syncing with the pulse of home unearthed. She climbed into the van unaided, waving to Riley as the woman throttled her bike, the wind catching her cropped hair like a banner of solidarity. The ride back unfolded under a sky clearing to blue, the convoy stretching like a silver vein through the city veins. Wind rushed through open windows, carrying the crisp tang of freedom and faint wildflowers from roadside blooms. Hannah leaned against the seat, the patch warm under her touch, fragments cascading into wholeness. Schoolyard cheers as bikes encircled her, backyard fires where stories sealed bonds, her parents' hands clasped amid the glow. Not every face returned, not every laugh echoed full, but the heart of it did, the unyielding shield of brothers who'd drop horizons for one soul. At Elena's ranch, the house welcomed them with porch light steady as a lighthouse, stew simmering anew in quiet victory. The crew gathered on the lawn, bikes parked in a protective arc, sharing nods and low tails under emerging stars. Bear lifted Hannah onto the porch swing, its chains creaking softly, the evening air laced with cooling earth and distant engines cooling. "You rode through the storm, kid," he said, settling beside her. She leaned into his arm, the leather scent a bridge to forgotten rides. "Like Papa, like you all." Elena watched from the door, tears tracing silent paths, the aunt's role solidified in the circle's embrace. Night deepened, fireflies dancing like sparks from exhaust, the group's murmurs fading to contented hush. Hannah's eyes grew heavy, dreams promising full return, not forced but gentle, coaxed by loyalty's persistent rumble. The accident's void had yielded to thunder's truth, corruption's web severed by honor's blade. Jack and Sarah's legacy lived here, in the chosen family roaring onward, sacrifices honored in every mile, every quiet vigil kept. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was the road itself, paved with promises that outlasted crashes and shadows. As stars wheeled overhead, the engines idled one last time, a soft lullaby for the girl reclaimed. Her whisper of brothers, now a full chorus in her soul. The iron vows dispersed into the dark, but their bond endured, a legacy of thunder and unbreakable kin, carrying Hannah toward morning's bright with remembered light. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these tales of loyalty and redemption touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join the crew. We've got more stories revving up on the horizon.